around what needs to be protected works best. The container should, if possible, not have any gaps, as the military found that even the microscopic space around rivets on a missile allowed some infiltration if they were not sealed with conductive paint. A steel 55-gallon drum or small metal container could be soldered shut or sealed with conductive paint. Aluminum foil provides some protection, especially if all potential gaps have the foil rolled and crimped shut. You might not realize that your microwave oven unplugged is an excellent shield. A regular stove, fridge, washer, or dryer will also provide a degree of EMP protection. Antennas to radios should be as short as possible. Computerized ignition in cars should be disconnected and other wire circuits unplugged to shorten wires as much as possible in a crisis. Home appliances should remain unplugged when not in use during a crisis. The shorter the wires, the less EMP will be picked up. The most vulnerable are computer chips and some transistors. Normal inline breakers and plug strips are not fast enough to protect from EMP. You might consider spare parts in an EMP protected container. The electromagnetic pulse strength will diminish rapidly with distance, but this type of weapon may be used very first to disrupt communications and may be an early warning of what is to come. In conclusion, we will state that prudence in light of scriptural prophecy and observance of world conditions dictates that we should be prepared for nuclear war, accident, or terrorist act. The cost of advanced preparation is little in comparison to the potential benefits. The most critical need is shelter providing blast and fallout protection. The shelter must have air, light, sanitation, food, and water. Thyroid damage from the internal absorption of radioactive iodine can be blocked by filling up the thyroid with healthy forms of iodine, taken in much larger than regular dietary amounts. Up to 99% of the internal absorption of radioactive iodine, 131, can be blocked by this method. If we do not have instruments to measure fallout or accurate information from other sources, then we would need to act like the heaviest fallout potential was received. The alternative is the use of the home-makeable Kearney fallout meter or the use of commercial radiation detection devices. The book Nuclear War Survival Skills is a treasure of information and instructions on how to survive and skills necessary to cope with very different living conditions after a nuclear disaster. This book should be in every home, and every family should be familiar with its contents. A hope based upon an eternal perspective and understanding of blessings promised in our day can be critical to our emotional and spiritual stability in the days to come. Knowing these things beforehand can be an invaluable blessing. Rereading 3rd Nephi and the book of Revelation with an eye focused on the promised blessings can help tremendously. We again recommend the book of Revelation today as a help in your study. And last of all, we hope that your personal and family preparation will be inspired, adequate, and timely. That all things will work together for your good, including the challenges, difficulties, and temporary sorrows that are a hallmark of the last days. Following our video production is a short 24-minute U.S. government-produced civil defense film titled About Fallout. Although it has been some time since such information has been provided by our government, the message and information is still timely and accurate. We recommend that you view it, keeping in mind that government shelter, supplies, and preparation are currently wholly inadequate if a nuclear crisis should arise, and must be replaced by personal and family preparedness. As Latter-day Saints, we've been blessed with the commandment and advice to store a year's supply of food. This is my favorite book on the subject. There are no more important skills than those addressed within the pages of this book, and it's available from church distribution. We will also be demonstrating some skills from this book, Basic Self-Reliance. This is the book used by our service missionaries, and it's also available from church distribution. As you can see, we have a bucket inside of a bucket. The inside bucket has a layer of gravel, and the gravel holds a layer of sand in place. The sand is on top of a layer of charcoal. Outside we have a layer of charcoal, another layer of sand, and then we have gravel on the top holding it all in place. The water goes in the top here, will percolate down through the gravel, the sand, the charcoal, and then back up through here, and then as you turn the tap on, the water would come out. Now you could make this much more efficient by taking particularly dirty water and put it in a barrel and let it sit there for a period of, say, 12 hours to settle out any fines, and then you could treat it with Clorox, then run it through here, or treat it with Clorox at the end process, because this will essentially not remove the bacteria, but it will filter the water, and so you have a very clean and pure water. We're here at the well at my house, and we're going to be demonstrating getting water without electricity. This is important because after a nuclear disaster or other disasters, a well may be the most reliable source of long-term water. First, we're going to be demonstrating the principle of the well bucket. And I've made this simple illustration out of something clear so that you can see the workings of the well bucket. Normally you'd make this out of a can, but suppose you and your family was traveling a long distance and you came across a well. You could look down and you could see water maybe 100 feet down. If you couldn't get that drink out, it would be very disappointing. But you could take a simple juice can, cut a hole in the bottom, and take a piece of rubber and place that over the side. And then take some wires, wrap the wires around, and if you got a little bit of glue or something, you could seal in the hole so it doesn't leak down in these holes. When this hits the bottom of the water can go in the bottom, and then as you pick it up, the water will come out. Otherwise, the can would simply float on top of the water. A more elaborate version, a long-term version, something that people who have a well might want to invest in ahead of time, is a well bucket made out of a piece of PVC pipe. You use a reducer. These can be purchased at any hardware store that sells fittings for plumbing. That is the stopper that goes in the back of your toilet. Get a new one. And this fits here, and this does not leak at all. And this would fit in like this, use the same wire principle, and you can actually bring water quicker out of the well with a large one of these than you could with a pump. Even a municipality could make a large one out of a 6 or even an 8-inch pipe and remove a great deal of water for a lot of people. One of the problems we have to deal with, however, is that there is a pipe going down the center of the well, going down to the pump. And there's also these spacers. This would make it difficult to get a pump or the well bucket down without removing the well. There is an alternative, however, and that is a well bucket made out of a simple piece of PVC pipe 1 1/4 inches in diameter. This will fit around the side of most of those pipes. This bucket, as the bottom foot valve, is using a marble. We have a spacer and then a reducer, and we simply place the marble inside of this. This is not going to bring a very large amount of water up each time, but it would be sufficient to get a drink. We will remove the well cap, and down we go. Up we come. And voila, we have a drink. We're now going to be demonstrating a simple and effective pump made from PVC pipe. This pump was invented by my home teacher, Scott Hutchins, and so we call this the Hutchins pump. And it really does work. The bottom is made from PVC pipe, 1 1/4 inches, so it will fit around the outside of the well without removing the pump. We have a reducer, and in the reducer sits a marble. And so this will allow the water to go only one direction. Inside of this, we take 3/4 inch PVC pipe, and with the spacers, this is exactly the right size to fit down the center of this. Now, to give us a tight seal, we place a rubber O-ring. Now, if we're going to a large depth, we found that if you made a little bit larger space and actually placed 2 O-rings, we got a little tighter seal. But for a barrel-sized pump, which is what we're demonstrating here to begin with, This works fine. Between these spacers, we have placed a washer. Now, this can be a nylon washer or a metal washer, or a reducer will work equally well. There's a beveled side of the washer and a flat side. If you use the beveled side, it gives you a little tighter seal around the marble. So the marble goes inside of the pump. The large marble goes in. These fit together like this, and this will give us our pumping action. Now we'll show how this is going to work in the actual well. We're now back at the wellhead. This is my daughter Heather, who's going to be helping in this demonstration. We're going to show this little wonder in operation. As you can see, we have an elbow here. We have a fitting that will adapt for a garden hose, and I can actually run this garden hose quite a distance. We have a clamp that's holding it in place, made from a 2x4 cut in half with the clamps on it. And you need to be a little careful. You don't want to come down real hard on this because you actually punch the bottom out of this pump. Let's show you how this works now. Takes a few times to get it primed. We can actually pump about 10 gallons per minute with this pump. This Hutchins pump is not found in the book, but it really works. We're now going to demonstrate how to remove a pump from a well. In your existing well, you'll find that down about 6 feet, there's what they call a well shoe. These are two pieces of brass fitting that slide together, holding it in place so that the well pipe can go into your house underground so that it doesn't freeze and expose to the weather. By taking a pipe like this with a threaded fitting, this can be screwed into the top of that well shoe, and then you can lift it up and remove the pump from the well. Now, if your pump is down less than 100 feet or slightly over 100 feet, you may have flexible pipe and not too much weight, and so you could simply grab hold of that and just pull that out. If it's down much deeper, traditionally a well puller would come out with a hoist, but there's a way to do this manually. This tool that we talked about before can also be used as a lifting device. You could use a much longer piece of wood if you're down very deep so that two people could get on each end, and you could actually make two of these so that as you lift the well up, two people on each end could lift up, and then you could screw another one on to hold it in place while you get another bite and lift again, and this way remove the pump from your well, which would be necessary to use the large buckets for a deep well. We're now going to be demonstrating what is probably the most efficient little wood stove you'll ever come across. This wood stove is made with a 12-quart galvanized bucket. Inside of the bucket, we've wrapped it with tin foil. We've made a grate. This is made out of either baling wire or coat hangers. It has a damper that moves up and down so you can adjust the airflow. And inside you can see it has these wires which go across, enabling us to set the pan in the center. And we've wrapped these wires up around the side and flared them out a little ways, and so this will hold the pan evenly in the container. 8 ounces of wood with this stove will cook a meal for 8 to 12 people. We're now going to bring 12 cups of water to a boil. Let's see what we've got. Okay, we now have the fire going. There's the remainder of the kindling from the 8 ounces of wood. And you can see that we have the fires going up around the sides of the pot. I'm going to take the pot and place it carefully in the center there, and we'll time it and see how long it takes. It's now been 4 minutes and we're just starting to get a few bubbles and some steam coming out of it. We'll give another few minutes to get to a rolling boil. It's now been 6.5 minutes and you see we have a nice rolling boil. We put the rest of the wood on. To be more efficient, we might want a smaller flame and cook for a little bit longer. But if you're interested in cooking fast and hot, which is what we did this time, you can see that we got a nice rolling boil out of it. Maybe a good idea to leave a lid on the pot. We've got a few ashes that have blown up from the side and landed in there, but this is a great stove. It's now been 8 minutes and you can see we have a big rolling boil. In order to make the most efficient use of this stove, we'd now take and add our ingredients for soup or stew or mush or whatever we're making, and we'd wrap the pot in blankets or quilts or straw, whatever we have as an insulating material,
place that inside of a box, some foam insulation, or perhaps even a Coleman cooler, and let that sit for another 4 to 6 hours. And in this way we'll get the most efficient use of the small amount of wood that we may have available.
This is the positive pressure pump that we've mentioned. It's an ingenious design because it pumps with both the pulling stroke and the pushing stroke. This pump actually outperforms very expensive pumps that are in many shelters. It's made out of wood. I'm not going to go into the internal design because you can see that in the book Nuclear War Survival Skills, but simply explain the function. As you pull, these flaps opening and closing. There's flaps on the other side of the box that would be doing it on the opposite push, and this would represent the air intake. This pump has the advantage that the air could actually pump through a filter box, and that would provide protection from dust or fallout. That filter box could be you could add decontaminants such as hydrogen peroxide or Clorox if you're protecting from biologicals, and it could be used essentially as a respirator or a gas mask for your entire home, because as you created a positive pressure and the air begins to expand through the going out, it would eliminate or reduce the air that would be trying to come in through the cracks. This design was modified by a friend of mine. Instead of using the wooden push-pull that was used in the book, he made his out of metal. I don't know, this has not been tested, where the one in the book has been tested for many, many hours, but it seems that this would be equally or perhaps more durable. He also made his piston out of self-lubricating plastic instead of wood with metal flanges on it. In looking at shelter designs, one of the things that Mr. Kearney discovered was that very few shelters had adequate air supply. And so he invented this simple pump. He calls it the Kearney Air Pump, or KAP for short. The design is simple. We have plastic flaps. They're taped down over a wire hinge. The back is window screen. It can be chicken wire or strings stretched back and forth. And the way it works is you simply pull on the string, and as it swings back and forth, it moves a great deal of air through your shelter. A KAP this size would move enough air for 50 people in cool weather and 10 to 20 people in warm weather. A KAP the size of a door would move enough air for 400 people. If you're going to spend 2 to 3 weeks in a shelter, then light is extremely important. Here is an expedient candle lantern made from a soda pop can that works wonderfully well. Also an oil lamp. 2 ounces of cooking oil will give you 8 hours of light. And this can be rancid cooking oil. It doesn't need to be your fresh stuff, so don't throw it away. The wick is stiffened with a little bit of wire. We have the nails to hold it down, and of course wire as a hanger. We should also not overlook some of the modern miracles that we have, such as these LED flashlights that burn for hundreds of thousands of hours with the bulbs and hundreds of hours with a set of batteries. This one even has a hand crank, so that you would never be without light. And 2 settings for the bulbs to conserve energy. I love the book Nuclear War Survival Skills because they tested everything. Some of the early books, including some of the government shelters, use a simple bucket as an outhouse facility. And they do work. The trouble is that immediately the materials begin to decompose and give off gases. And they found that 2 or 3 days after being in the shelter, the smell was untenable. So they invented a simple way to get those gases outside of your shelter. They use a garden hose, cut a hole in a bucket, place some tape around it to create a complete air seal, and this hose goes outside of your shelter. When the lid is on this, it is completely odor-free, and so the only time you'd have odor is when it was actually being used. So you'd place this near your exit and have the fan and pump going so that those odors would be exited out of your facility. This is a tested and proven expedient grain mill. It consists of 3 pieces of pipe that are taped together and a container to put your grain in. Supposing you and your family was traveling and came across a source of grain but no way to grind it. If you knew this, within an hour you'd be making bread. The way it works is you put about 1 inch of grain in the bottom, and then you simply pound away like this.
This mill is slower than my hand grinder. My hand grinder is 3 times faster and makes better flour. But the key is that the wind can pass through these tubes, and as you hit down on it, it does not blow the flour out of your way, and you get a clean cut each time you hit down with it. You might want to consider how you're going to wash your clothes without electricity. This is a simple washing machine that works much better than a rock at the stream bank. And the way it works is you have a bucket with a hole in it. A 5-gallon bucket would be sufficient for most families, but our large family will use a larger bucket. And a simple up and down motion will get your clothes very clean without causing excessive wear. We at the Nonprofit Institute for Nuclear Preparedness have used our nonprofit status as well as volume buying to make this book, Nuclear War Survival Skills, available for only $5. That's 75% off of the current bookstore and internet price. In this video we've covered some of the information, but there's much more there, and we recommend that every home have a hard copy of this book, that you refer to it often, so that should such a need arise, your family is prepared with the adequate information and planning necessary to save you and your family. In looking for quality sources of potassium iodide tablets, we found that most drugstore and internet sources listed their product at around $1 a day. We, however, were able to find this brand at 10 cents a day, 250 tablets, and we have it for $12.50. It's already halfway through its 4-year shelf life, but the manufacturer tells us that it's good for at least 4 years beyond the stated shelf life. In addition to the potassium iodide tablets, we're also making available this bottle, 40 grams of pure, granular, U.S. pharmaceutical grade potassium iodide. This is the form of potassium iodide that will keep the longest, has the longest shelf life. We have this bottle available for only $5. This is the chemical equivalent of 2.5 bottles of the tablets. Instructions for its use are found in the book Nuclear War Survival Skills. In seeking to understand the events of the last days, there is probably no greater gift than the book of Revelation. As Latter-day Saints, we have a unique perspective of this important work. We know that Nephi, who has had a vision of our day, sat down to tell us exactly what we needed to know, and the Lord told him that this information would come to us through John the Revelator. Skipping 1,000 years into the future, we have Moroni, who's once again compiling the record. He's gone through the vision of the brother of Jared and sealed that great vision in the first 2/3 of the Book of Mormon, which we do not have. Once again, he was going to tell us what we needed to know, and the Lord told him that this information would come to us through the writings of John the Revelator. I've written a book about the Book of Revelation called The Book of Revelation Today. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. John clearly identifies 6 evil latter-day identities, and understanding those identities helps us identify the nature and order of the 7 latter-day plagues that John numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I believe that there's great significance to that order. We have this book available for $7, which is half the bookstore price, and I recommend that you read this book. Thank you.
Let's talk for a moment about radiation detection. Since we cannot see, feel, taste, or smell radiation, and yet it can be very deadly, it's important that we know how much radiation exists in the environment so that we know when it's safe to go out. There's a number of types of radiation. This is what they call a dosimeter. This would be worn on a person or placed in an area we want to test the radiation. And it has a scope that you look through. You can see a scale inside with a needle that moves across. And when you want to recharge that, re-zero it, you simply use this recharger, put it on like this, and then turn it, and it will take it back to zero, and you can start over again. We've all seen this type of radiation detection device. This one is over 40 years old, so I don't know whether you can always vouch for the accuracy of a meter like this, but there's quite a few of them on the surplus market, and they may be a good bargain. It's important that we have a method of calibrating these, and most of us do not have a sufficient source of radiation to test it, particularly at the high levels. And that's why I think it's so important that regardless of what we have, that we have the ability to create one of these Kearney radiation meters. This one runs on the laws of physics, and so it is always accurate. It uses static electricity, so it never needs batteries, and it's made with things that you'd commonly have around the home, and we're going to go through the manufacture of this meter. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it works. The heart of this meter is 2 sets of aluminum foil plates. These plates will be suspended on threads and hanging in the center of the meter. And when they receive a static electricity charge, since it is a light charge, they will actually repel each other and hang like that, somewhat apart. The radiation will have a deionizing effect and cause them to go back together. And we measure how quickly they go back together to determine the radiation dose. And on the side of the can, there is numbers. You could say it moved 4 millimeters in 15 seconds, then you'd know you was getting 12 rads per hour. It has a charging wire. The charging wire has this piece of tape on it so you can get it close with the tape, and then you fine tune it by moving it a little closer with this free piece of string. You don't want to be touching these ends because that would take the charge away, and you want it close but not touching. That'll allow the static electricity charge, which is a high voltage charge, low amps, but high voltage, to jump from you or from your charging source along this wire and into the foil plates. There's a scale at the top so we can measure how far apart they are. You also need a ruler, and the ruler is placed on this little seat, and you put your forehead on there so you're measuring exactly 12 inches above so that you get a consistent reading. And then you also need a timing device with a second hand. This is my first watch, and it uses no electricity. It's not computer run, and so this would not be affected by the electromagnetic pulse. Some of the very inexpensive clocks that run on batteries do not have quartz movement and just have a simple motor in, and those would be also safe from electromagnetic pulse. But it's important that you have something with a second hand, either a watch that was protected from electromagnetic pulse or something that would not be subjected to electromagnetic pulse. Okay, the components. First of all, we need a can. The can has to be this size and dimensions. This is an 8-ounce tomato sauce can, or mandarin oranges. Sometimes you'll see pieces of mushroom in them. A soda pop can is the same diameter, so if it was cut off at the top, it would also be sufficient to work. You need the directions and templates. And in your book, Nuclear War Survival Skills,